Today is February 23rd, 1987. This is Joe Todd, an interview at Mr. Clifford Meyer, and you go by Dutch in Norman, Oklahoma.
Norman, Oklahoma.
Mr. Meyer, where were you born?
I beg pardon?
Where were you born?
I was born in Bucks, B-U-C-K, capital G-R-O-V-E, Kansas.
Kansas. When's your birthday?
May the 23rd, 1894.
1894.
May the 23rd is my birthday.
Who was your father?
Will H. Meyer.
Will H. Meyer. And your mother?
My mother passed away when I was born. And my grandmother took me.
Was this your father's mother or?
My father's mother.
Okay.
In Holton, 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 Kansas.
What was your mother's name? Do you?
My mother?
Yeah.
Well, Boy, you got me there.
Okay.
It's been so long since
Okay. What was your grandmother's name?
Elizabeth. Oh, no, or Lisetta. Lissetta.
What was that again? I'm sorry.
Lisetta. L-I-S-E-T-T-A. Lisetta.
Okay.
She was from Wareheim, Germany. And when I received my orders to go overseas, her son, my uncle, brought her from Norman over to Little Rock, Arkansas to tell me goodbye, and she told me about her kinfolks that remained over in across the pond.
Where was your father from?
Dad was reared in Wisconsin. He was born in Wisconsin. Moved from there to to Holton, Holton, which is 30 miles north of Topeka, Kansas.
When did the family move to Oklahoma?
When?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's see. He came down here and went into the furniture and undertaking business.
In Norman?
In Norman. And it was known at that time as the Big Chair, and they had a great big telephone post out in front of the business and had a chair, a big chair up on top of that, and that was the name of the business, the Big Chair.
Where was it located?
Norman.
I mean, what was the address?
The what?
Do you remember the address of the store?
Oh, now I'll forget the number, but it was in the 100 block of downtown business in those days.
On Main Street?
Yes.
Why did your father move to Norman?
Well, in those days they had a group of men that had in Texas 1,000 acres were just like 10 acres at this day and time. And they got a hold of my grandfather and told him about the land in Texas that could be just about the same as homesteaded, just so you'd go down and develop this land. So Dad said to my granddad, his father, that he thought that was a pretty good deal which it was. So they came down through Norman, and they took on 2 Norman residents and took them on down to Texas to homestead some of this land down there. So that was the way we were introduced to that land down there.
What part of Texas?
Beeville is on the way to Corpus Christi.
How did you travel to Texas?
In those days and times, we was lucky. No, they had coaches that they put on the passenger train, extra. And when Dad found out about the business could be here in Norman, furniture undertaking both. So Granddad had some beautiful dapple gray horses, and he said that he would give my father, his son, 4 horses so it could be used here in Norman to pull a hearse, 2 horses at a time. So they loaded them in a car with a lot of other things that they wanted to bring to Oklahoma. So that was the way it was started, the big chair, furniture and undertaking here in Norman.
What year did the family move to Oklahoma?
What year what?
What year did you move to Oklahoma? What year?
Well, I wasn't quite old enough to go to a public school. The Catholic priest was a very good friend of my father due to the undertaking business. All he would have to do is to call Dad and tell him circumstances, and he would send a man out to pick up the corpse. So that was the way that we...
What was the priest's name?
The what?
Do you remember the name of that priest? Do you remember his name? The name of the Catholic priest?
Metter. Father Metter.
Father Metter.
Metter.
Did you go to the Catholic church in Norman?
That was the Catholic church in Norman.
Is that where you...
And I wasn't old enough to go to public school here in Norman, so the Catholic priest said, well, we'll arrange that. He can come and go to our school, and then when he passes, that they'll accept him and take him into the public school.
Do you remember the Catholic school? Tell me about going to school there.
How?
Tell me about going to school at the Catholic school.
Well, it was far removed from the public school, because the priest, they say so, and you had to do what he asked you to do. So there was no hard feelings or anything, and naturally Dad wanted the undertaking business from the Catholic people. So that tied things in pretty good.
How long did you attend the Catholic school?
Till I was just old enough to go to a public school without any trouble.
And how old were you?
I was just 7 years old.
Okay. So you moved here about 1900?
Yes.
What was the name of the Catholic school?
That was all. They had no, it was just a Catholic school.
And what was the name of the Catholic church?
Catholic.
Would you describe the hearse that was pulled by the horses?
At a funeral?
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Okay, what did the hearse look like?
Well, in those days it was they did have rubber tires, wheels, and the rubber on the wheel was about something about like that all the way around. And people here thought that was something wonderful because Dad had the first one that was here. So that helped along. Father Metter was the father of the Catholic Church, and he was a mighty good friend of Dad and the family, our family. So that way we got along with the Catholics.
Where did your father get the coffins for the funerals?
What was what?
Where did your father get the coffins for the funerals? Or the caskets? Where did he get them?
Where did he get it?
Yes, sir.
Here in Norman.
Who made the caskets?
The Catholics.
Oh, okay.
And the Catholic priest had a lot of friends. And the way it started, the Catholic priest came to Dad and asked if he would object if they had a funeral, if they would toll the bell. And Dad said no. They wanted to toll the bell all during the funeral.
Now, where was the bell? What bell was this?
It here in Norman.
I mean, was it the bell on the church or?
Oh yes, it was up in the tower of the church.
Where was the church located?
It's over where it is now, only it has been remodeled and but Father Metter, M-E-T-T-E-R, was the Catholic priest.
Did you ever meet Bishop Meerschaert?
Meet what?
Did you ever meet Bishop Meerschaert, the Catholic bishop in Oklahoma?
If I did, I was too young in a way to be impressed very much.
Did you help your father in the furniture store?
Yes, as much as I could.
What did you do in the store?
Me?
Yes.
Well, in those days, we had high chairs. We put some hooks down from the ceiling, fastened them with bolts, screws about that big up there. And there's certain sections in the store where with children's high chair, and then there was for elderly people. And we had a large pole that was really came in carpets, rugs, and would roll around those and stand them up or put them on racks. And we used those and just different things to draw attention to the people.
Was the undertaking business in the same building
Yes.
as the big chair?
Yes, in fact, I'm trying to think of the man's name that owned the building. My grandfather was, he wasn't a rich man, but he was past the average. And he gambled on stock. He wanted thoroughbred bulls, and he had stallions to anybody that had a mare that was in heat, they called them. Well, they would bring them into Granddad and had a place there where he could put them with the stallion and breed them, is what they called it.
Did your grandfather race horses?
A ranch?
Did they have horse races here at that time?
Yes, within about 6 blocks of our house in Holton, Holton, Kansas, they had racetracks. Then, when the circus or things like that came to town, they rented that space down there, and that was paid of enjoyment. Well, it was making money too, you see. So Granddad he was thinking all the time and trying to teach his son and his grandson the same thing.
What was your grandfather's name?
Henry F.
Henry F. Meyer?
Yeah, and my dad was William Meyer.
Did they have horse races here in Norman?
No.
No?
Never did.
Would you tell me again where your father got the caskets for the funerals?
Got what?
Got the caskets for the funerals? Who made the caskets and the coffins?
Oh, they were, at first, they got them in books, a catalog, like they do different things in furniture and that, and they were given to my dad, and he would order, and we had to keep certain numbers on hand, and we had them there on Main Street.
Which catalog did you order them from?
Pardon?
Which catalog did you order them from? Was it like Sears or?
Boy, no, it was a regular casket company, because they made anything from a casket that big for a baby up to the grown people.
Yeah.
And we had to keep a certain number of them on display where we embalmed the people. A person died, we'd send the hack out, pick them up and bring them in and embalm them.
How did you embalm the bodies at that time?
How?
Yeah.
First you drain the blood out of them and insert this liquid into there, and it won't decay like blood would.
What type of liquid was it?
It was just, they called it embalming fluid.
And what did you do with the blood you drained out? Where did it go?
The what?
What did you do with the blood you drained out?
Well, they put this fluid in the system.
But what did you do with the blood?
Threw it away.
Just threw it away. Okay. What were your other duties around the funeral home and the furniture store? What did you do?
I worked in a confectionery store. Before school in the morning, I'd go down and sweep out. And it was on Main Street. And it was really the nicest, we called it a candy kitchen. You served ice cream and you could get sandwiches there. So that was a little bit rough on me, but I got to a point that I enjoyed it. And went to school, because I was going to a Catholic school until I was 6 years of age. So
What were your duties in the confectionery store?
in the in which store?
The confectionery store.
Well, Dad wasn't very strict about having me work around. He run me on errands and helped out. But Oh, I don't know.
Could you give me a description of Main Street in Norman about 1900 when you started the school?
Well, Father Metter was the head of the Catholic Church. And then he had a man that had been with him for quite a few years to help out around the church, to see that it was taken care of and cleanliness. And then in certain places in the church where you could go and kneel down and they would pray over you. So I was almost called a Catholic for a while, but it kept me going to school.
What did downtown Norman look like?
Norman, at that time? Well, you might think this is funny, but I've seen merchants. It was quite a few years before they put in any kind of pavement, and they used brick, laid brick in regular, but that didn't work out successfully because they hauled cotton into a cotton gin here in Norman that was just 2 blocks off of Main Street. And so with those muddy streets, it was quite a problem, but they were thinking too.
Were the buildings made of brick or wood at that time?
The
buildings.
Oh, most of them were brick.
Brick. What were some of the major businesses in Norman?
Furniture and undertaking were together, grocery stores, and clothing. Those were the 3 main stores.
Do you remember Statehood Day when Oklahoma became a state in 1907?
I was, yeah, they had a parade. And it was so muddy that they couldn't very well use any wagons or things like that. And they had to ride horses down these muddy streets.
Was there a big celebration in Norman?
Absolutely.
Tell me about it.
Well, most of it was done on horseback. The merchants wanted their names put on, painted, and they had a painter here in town that painted signs, and they could put just a broad piece on sign cloth, hang it on the saddle and down, and you could have, if a merchant wanted to pay a little bit extra, he could advertise that way. As those horses went down the street, here's I.M. Jackson, here's H.P. Meyer. Name was put on by a sign painter. And that was a long time ago.
What did you do on Statehood Day?
Yeah. They generally had things planned for me but I wasn't but about 7 years old.
Were there many saloons in Norman?
The what?
Were there many saloons in Norman?
There were. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, we had, the Chickasaw Saloon was on the middle of the 200 block Main Street. The Indians from across the river out here, regardless if there was quite a bit of water in the river, they'd come across, swim their horses. They'd come over. Now this is the God fact. They had ride in, they had these swinging doors in the saloon. One of them would get in there and open have it so he could hold it. They would ride up to the bar and order their drink. Well, some of the people in Norman kind of rejected that. They thought it might cause trouble. Because when they started to leave, they had swinging doors in the saloon. They'd hit that door and open like, come out and go down Main Street with shooting. Now it was pretty wild in those days.
What were the names of the other saloons in town?
Chickasaw Saloon was the main one, and they had swinging doors, so naturally they were the ones that got the business.
What did the inside of that saloon look like?
Look, great big bar with a large mirror. They had bottles of whiskey and beer lined up along there. When they came in, they also had whiskey in larger containers, so they could add anything they wanted. But it was very peculiar to watch them ride those horses in the saloon up to the bar and order their drink. A little wild too, if you want to know something.
Were you ever in that saloon?
Oh yes, it's just half block from where we lived. They had 2-story buildings there, and Dad had the upstairs into like a home, rooms. So we'd go up the steps and go into your home. Chickasaw Saloon was the main place for the people that wanted to get a beer or buy a whiskey, and especially the people from the Chickasaw Nation, which was on the other side of Norman businesses. And the Indians would come over horseback, regardless of how much water was in that river. They would hit it and come to Norman. They wouldn't get off and tie their horse, but they would swing the doors. They had double doors, like, swing the doors, and the Indians would ride in up to the bar and order a whiskey. People got a little bit sore of them in a way, because invariably when they drank, they got a little noise in. When they come out of that saloon, every one of them carried 6-shooters in holsters on the belt around their waist. They'd jerk that out and start shooting and take out West Main Street and come down to the Canadian River. It was pretty wild in those days.
What kind of lighting did the saloon have? What kind of light fixtures?
I don't recall exactly, because I was too young to even let you go. However, I did help sweep out.
You did?
And they paid, because there's only 4 doors to our furniture and undertaking store. And it was the Chickasaw Saloon.
Did they have tables and chairs in the saloon?
In the saloon or the big bar. Now the Indians, when they came over horseback and rode right in, the doors swung open on double hinges.
Yeah.
And they'd ride right up to the.
Mm-hmm. What did the Chickasaw Saloon do with all the whiskey at Statehood Day?
What now?
You know, they had prohibition at Statehood.
Mm-hmm.
What did they do with all the whiskey?
You could buy it in. They had quart bottles.
Mm-hmm.
They had jugs.
Mm-hmm.
They had wooden kegs.
But you know, at Statehood, whiskey was then against the law.
No, not that time.
But after Statehood it was, wasn't it, 1907?
When Statehood, yes, and Oklahoma went dry.
What'd they do with all the whiskey then?
Well, none of them was dumb enough to overstock themselves, and then the people that wanted to buy, you could buy it in kegs,
Okay. Yeah.
or you could buy it in cases. Mm-hmm. They get rid of it that way.
What year did you graduate from high school?
Oh, well, I played high school football. 1914, I believe it was the last year.
Tell me about, do you remember your commencement exercise?
In the university or in high school?
High school.
Very well, yes, because I was in the glee club and had to go up on the stage with the rest of the seniors or the glee club.
Do you remember who gave the commencement speech?
Yes, sir. The superintendent of the public school was a man by the name of Butcher, Butcher, and he was a good talker.
Why did you attend the University of Oklahoma? Any reason?
Not necessarily that it was more convenient than to go someplace like up to Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
To a school. Because in those days I had a high school and public school, and the first university school, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe I'm telling the truth about that, you had to pay a tuition to go to the university.
How much was the tuition?
I don't remember
Yeah.
how much it cost.
What did you study at the university?
What did I study?
Yes.
I sure can't remember. Outside of just ordinary, the state was divided up. Indian Territory was across the river, the Canadian River. They didn't have bridges or anything like that, and when the boys wanted to come over to raise cane, they'd jump those horses off in that water, they'd swim across, come over, pull out the 6-shooters and start shooting, and then we knew people that they were on the way, and they'd ride right in, had swinging doors in the saloon.
Would you tell me about being on the OU football team, 1915?
19 when?
Was it 1915 you played football?
Yeah.
Tell me about being on the football team.
Well, this was at the university
Yeah.
in 1915.
Mm-hmm.
They just came out and said that they were going to organize a team, and they offered anybody that wanted to buy a season ticket. It took care of all of the football games that season that was here in high school and in the university, so they wouldn't miss out on it. And that got a lot of business for people in Norman.
What position did you play on the team?
On football, I was looking this afternoon at some pictures. I was halfback and then got to play fullback.
What was your win and loss record?
Oklahoma won more games than they lost, and they were wise enough to sell books of tickets in them because they could do that for a season ahead of time. And these books, and the merchants went for that because they didn't cost as much.
What did your uniform look like?
The what?
What did the uniforms look like?
Regular football pads that had cane. I think they were made out of cane, and they used stripes in your britches, and if they got wet or anything like that, it didn't ruin them.
What kind of helmet did you have?
They were leather.
Leather?
Leather and cardboard.
Who was the football coach?
Well, Benny Owen was a fellow that came here from Kansas. They hired him to come down and talk to them. And he came down and got the student body together, told them what he could promise them, and then he wanted to know what they would promise him. And so he got along pretty good with the students.
What kind of man was he, Benny Owen?
What kind of what?
What kind of man was he, Benny Owen?
He didn't drink, he didn't cuss. He was a good football man because if things weren't going right, why, he'd call you out of the game and talk to you.
How did he talk to you?
G. Clyde was his worst cussing. G. Clyde. And he would hold up a game and call you out if you made an error in the way he felt the play should be made. And I mean it's soaked in too.
Tell me about some of the games that you remember and the big plays that you were involved with.
Well, we played Texas University. One year be here, next year it'd be down in Dallas. Because and you had to order your tickets ahead of time.
Where did you play the game in Dallas?
Out at the I don't remember the name. It had a park, but I don't remember the name of it anymore.
Was it Fair Park? Was that the name of it?
Something like that.
Yeah, okay. Was there a big celebration in Dallas in those years?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about it.
Well, there were too many drunks. People came to town to come and see a football game, And they stayed at a good hotel, went to a good saloon and bought whiskey, and they went down there to have a good time.
In which hotel did the football team stay in Dallas?
I don't remember that. I can see it, but I don't remember the name.
What part of town was it?
On the way to where the fairground is.
Mm-hmm. Was it close to downtown?
Mm-hmm.
How many years did you play for OU?
3.
15, 16, and 17?
14, 15, and 16.
Tell me about some of the players that you knew.
On the team?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of them, Claude Reeds was a heavy-set, big fellow, fast, and he was a fullback. Let's see, who played halfback? I don't remember. We didn't have any colored folks. In fact, Norman got to the point that they put on placards, "Nigger, don't let the sun go down on your back." And I mean, it helped out a whole lot. We didn't have any niggers in the school and the university.
Yeah.
But they did away with that because some of those niggers was awful good football players.
When was the first nigger on the football team?
We never had an all-colored team.
Yeah.
They were mixed in with the white boys. But they had to earn their leather.
Yeah. What year did you graduate from OU?
When?
Yes.
1915.
Now, you graduated in 15, or is that just the year you played? Did you graduate in that year, or is that just the year you played?
That was my last year I played.
Okay.
Oklahoma football.
Did you play in 1916?
Mm-hmm.
What about 1917?
No, 15.
15. Okay. Did you enlist, or were you drafted in the Army?
No, I enlisted, volunteered.
When?
Boy, I don't remember that. I went overseas, went to Camp Pike, Arkansas. That was a military base.
What part of Arkansas?
And I took the physical, and they give you kind of a test. And was lucky enough to make the grade.
Tell me about going to France, the boat trip.
Going to France?
Yeah.
Let's see, where did we ship out of?
Was it Hoboken? Was it Hoboken?
Hoboken, New York.
Yeah.
That was the shipping point.
What ship were you on?
Leviathan, if I'm not mistaken.
Tell me about the boat trip.
There wasn't much to tell, only they got scared to death of going over that we realized that we were sticking our neck out or done something, or going to do something. And Where did we land? Hoboken.
Okay, you left Hoboken. Did you land at Brest or Le Havre?
Hoboken
Well, that's where you left from.
in New Jersey, and
Yeah.
Hoboken was the shipping point.
Did you land at Brest or Le Havre?
Hmm. I believe it was Le Havre.
What unit were you a member of?
The what?
What division were you in the Army?
Uh, hmm.
What, the 90th?
It wasn't the 90th Division. It was the 87th Division.
Tell me about being in France during the war. What happened?
Well, it was kind of rough in a way. First, they had to billet us with French families. They didn't have the hotels and things like that to accommodate. So they'd pick so many and put them with people in France and pay them for it.
What did you do after that? Where did you go?
Let's see what. I worked for Morris and Company, were the meat packers in Oklahoma City.
Okay. But tell me, were you in any of the big battles in France?
Yes, several of them.
Tell me about them.
Well, it isn't. We had a major, had a colonel, and a major, and then the captains, and the first lieutenants, second lieutenants, then the privates.
What rank did you have?
I was a lieutenant.
A lieutenant. And were you in the infantry?
Yes.
Tell me about going over the top.
Oh, it's hard to explain. No fooling.
What were your feelings?
To get under cover as much as possible.
And what battles were you in France?
Well, it was more as to your landing points.
Were you at the Meuse Argonne?
Yes, I was in the Argonne Forest.
What happened there?
We took advantage of the situation of hiding as much as possible behind trees, because we didn't have the artillery that we had later on, and we had good company commanders that had had a little experience of hiding his men going through the forest. And we got by pretty good.
Were you at Saint Mihiel?
Hmm?
Were you at Saint Mihiel?
No. Saint Mihiel.
Yeah.
Mihiel.
Mihiel. Yeah, Mihiel.
Mihiel.
Were you there?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
It was too rough to try to remember, because they implanted some large artillery on roads that they knew that we would be marching, and it wasn't any fun. There was history wrote on that, the whole thing.
Is that history pretty accurate?
Yes, it was.
Where were you on Armistice Day, the day the war ended?
Ended? St. Mihiel. I believe it was in a camp.
What does the inside of a trench look like?
Inside of what?
The trenches?
Well, they there were very few of them that were dug with machinery.
How deep were those trenches?
They would be standing erect. You could just look over the edge.
Was there a big celebration when the war ended?
Yes.
Do you know where were you when the war ended?
The Battle of...
Was it the Meuse Argonne or St. Mihiel?
we were in through St. Mihiel, but
what did you do whenever the armistice was declared at the 11th hour, the 11th day, 11th month? What did you do?
I bet that we was on the way to a treaty. And even my own men kidded me about it.
Did you and your men celebrate at that time?
No, not. But they had been through their billeting, what they called it, places to take care of their soldiers on these drives. And that way, we knew in advance how many men we could take care of and got by without losing.
Yeah.
They did do a lot of they knew of places that we were bound to march through, and they dug some and undermined it with some high explosive.
What did you think when you first saw the Germans? What was your reaction?
Well, there wasn't any fear. We had been forewarned that they had pretty good arms, ammunition. They had a small cannon, and from up in the highland, the thing that we had to watch both because we had to march in columns. And that kind of gave us away to a certain extent. And they took advantage of it.
Tell me about the boat trip back to America.
Well, we I even forgotten the port we left from, loaded out of friends.
Was it Le Havre or Brest?
It was Le Havre.
Le Havre.
Mhm.
Did you come into New York City?
New York City, and they, of course, advertised that the U.S. was coming home, and there was thousands of people down to welcome us back.
What did you think when you saw the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor?
I saluted it, just like a lot of others.
Was there a big victory parade in New York?
The what?
Did you have a victory parade in New York?
No. Mm-mm.
Just thousands of people there to greet you. How long before you got back to Oklahoma?
They sent us to Camp Dix, New Jersey. That was a military post. And they just kept us there. They sent the men to a theater in New York as a kind of a thank you deal. I was trying to remember the name of the I don't remember the name of the theater or the play now, but I did for many years. And we had to promise to be back in our camp if they gave us permission to go to these shows.
Were they shows on Broadway?
Mm-hmm.
You remember which show you saw?
I was trying to think it. There was a show that there's a song very popular, and that's the reason we got to go to it.
What did you do when you returned to Norman? What'd you do?
Well, my mother died, and my father was living, and his mother, my grandmother, came down from Kansas to Oklahoma to live with us. So things were pretty well taken care of.
So what kind of work did you do after the war?
What
kind of work did you do after the war?
I think the first job that I had was across the street from our furniture and undertaking store was a bowling alley. And I got a job setting pins in the bowling alley.
You know, the student union at OU, that was built in memory of the soldiers that went to the war?
Yes, some of them, but not too many. They had the days to celebrate and had them come out in uniform and with the standard colors and flags.
Is your name in the union?
Is there a name?
No, is your name on one of the plaques in the student union here?
Oh, back in those days, yes.
You know, there's a big plaque there with all the men that went to the war.
Yes.
Is your name on that plaque?
Yeah. And as you go down in the basement on the east side of the main building, they had a copper, it must have been 3 feet wide, and they had the names on that copper plaque.
Is your name on that plaque?
Yes, it's there today.
Mm-hmm. How long did you work in the bowling alley?
Well, that was after school, and the people at Bowl came down after supper to when they could bowl.
When did you get married?
I was trying to think who married men. I've got that marriage license at home.
What was your wife's name?
What?
What was your wife's name?
Haverstock. Haverstock. Vida Haverstock.
Vida Haverstock.
Was my wife.
Where was she from?
From Oklahoma, up by Stillwater. And she had gone to Stillwater prior to coming to Norman to go to the university.
Do you remember the commencement at the university when you graduated?
Well, yes. Kind of stuck up like we were proud of ourselves.
What year was that? What year was that?
I believe my certificate is 1915.
What did you do in the 1920s?
Well, I helped around in the furniture and undertaking business. Drove the hearse out to the cemetery, with a team, and where I could be. And at times I was inside of the store and worked.
Were there many of the young girls they call flappers in Norman?
Called what?
You know, the flappers in the 1920s, the young girls?
20.
Those are the ones that wore the short skirts and bobbed their hair.
That was only when they put on a parade.
Yeah.
That they were dressed that way.
Okay.
And there wasn't any pavement on the streets. It was muddy.
What about the 1930s, the Depression? How did the Depression affect you and your family?
It was after, I forget the year that I still have it, in a framed marriage license.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Mr. Meyer, I think we have a good interview.
Yeah, for a guy that's hitting close to that 100 mark in years of age.
I think you're doing very well. Anything else about the OU football team you want to talk about?
Yes, the teams, Missouri, Kansas, Arkansas, Texas, were 4 games that they look forward to. We would have a coach on the midnight train out of here, Santa Fe, that would take us to Texas. And they paid all expenses, which we certainly enjoyed because we didn't have that kind of money.
How did football at that time differ from football today?
Oh, I think it's it depended on who the coach of the team was. Benny Owen lost his arm. He had a friend out here by the Canadian River Bridge, and they had quail out there. So Benny, they went in, man and woman. Benny got in his horse and buggy, and this man told him if he come out, it was close to the Canadian River, that he would show him where these quail were and guarantee him a mess of quail. So Benny went out, and he thought if he loaded his gun and he did turn his dog loose, the dog could flush the quail and he'd get him a mess of quail. Well, as he started to, he stopped down by the river bridge, and he loaded a gun and put it on the step of a buggy. And as the dog started to leap out, he hit that hammer on his shotgun. And that's where Benny lost his arm. But he got back in that car, in that horse and buggy, come to Norman, and I was working in Kuhn Lindsay's confectionery at the time. It pulled up out in front, and I noticed that Dr. Bobo and Dr. Lowther, where they had the office up over the confectionery store, and they helped Benny out of the car, out of the horse and buggy, and took him upstairs and amputated that arm off. So that's how Benny came with one arm. But he had a lot of guts.
Where did the OU team play the games here in Norman?
Out at the field out there, they had a regular football field.
Is that where it is today?
No. Let's see. You know where the engineering building is?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was the football field in those days, and they had hog pasture. They had a fence about 4 feet high with hog wire, a 2x4 on the top of the post, nailed there, and people could come out. They didn't have a grandstand. They'd go out there and lean on that heavy timber that they'd build around, and that was our football field.
You still have your uniform?
We played football in uniform.
Oh, do you still have yours?
No, I gave it back to them.
You did?
Years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Meyer, I want to thank you for the interview.
Well, it was quite interesting to go through it.
Good. Thank you.